version of the Grand Canyon?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. That it was caused by Mars or Venus.
An electrical discharge between the Earth and some other very large body,
Right, right, yeah.
okay, which is most likely Mars, right? It's probably the case that the Grand Canyon and that much larger scar on Mars, which is called Val Marineris, were created by the same event, right? Now,
Yep.
you've got a funny kind of a thing where they talk about, they actually teach people. And I couldn't keep my face straight and try to tell somebody that the Grand Canyon was created by that little Colorado River, which flows through the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
It's
Oh yeah,
hilarious.
that little river carved that canyon, right? Now,
Yeah, it's
you've
hilarious.
got sediment layers on the canyon walls, right? And those layers of sediment were obviously put down by water, right? But when you look at the canyon itself, then water is not what happened, right?
Well,
It's like,
wait a second. Wait a second. Some water did flow through there because we know about pulse meltwater 1A and 1B, which rose in combination of those two pulses, rose the sea levels 400 feet. So there
okay,
was a lot of water that flowed over the North American continent when these thunderbolts melted the ice.
okay, but the water had nothing to do with creating the canyon.
No. I think Wall said that he surmises that it was Venus that carved out the Grand Canyon and Valley Marineris on Mars.
That could be, right? But that's the sort of thing that it would take, right? Now, you've
Yeah,
got
planetary pass.
It's in the Iliad.
And where the hell were people during all this?
Go
Just
ahead, Ted. I'm
hiding in a
sorry. Go
cave?
Running,
ahead.
running and pooping their pants.
Ted, finish your thought.
okay. I'm sorry. So I've got like a cat knocking things off the table. Try to get it. It's really something to try to keep up with. Basically, we've got two super rivers in the world. We've got the Volga and the Amazon. Both of those are shallow. I mean, you have to wade out quite a ways in either the Volga or the Amazon before you ever get to chest level. Okay, whereas the canyon, you walk up to the edge of the thing, and then you've got this sheer 2,000-foot drop, right? You fall off the edge, and you've got a problem. Um, Rocks that you get at the bottom of real rivers are smooth, right? Rivers wear rocks smooth. Okay, whereas the rocks on the canyon walls are all just pristine and sharp, right? Including rocks on mesas, which would have been hundreds of feet below water, if water had ever flowed to the top of the canyon. Of course, in real life, it never did, right? But, you've got the problem that real rivers have a finite number of tributaries, whereas the topography of the canyon is fractal. Okay, it's like what you call the sinuous rills. There's no counting them. Okay, and then you've got another problem which is bigger than all of that. And the other problem says, like, where did the material from the canyon go, right? I mean, if water had created the canyon, there would be some absolutely gigantic pile of rocks and debris out there in the Pacific Ocean, where the Colorado River used to empty into the Pacific. It just isn't there. It's like the material from the canyon is missing. That's because the material from the canyon was vaporized and blasted into space.
Ejected out of the ground.
Yeah, I wouldn't
And
say ejected. I would say vaporized and blasted into space. I mean, it just ceased to exist.
Well, when
it
you look at
blew
when
down wind too.
when you
There's a
look at
bunch
the
of sand.
when you look at the electrical experiments, it the stuff doesn't really get vaporized. It just gets spat out in these massive storms, and it gets deposited in other places. If you look at Andy Hull's talking about how mountains are created and how these updraft, supersonic updrafts and downdrafts grab all this material and sort it out and make little mountain ranges out of it with uh, V buttresses, and it's just
Yeah, we got
not
some
all of
words
it gets vaporized. There's some of it, yeah, it gets vaporized by the heat, but not all of it. Most of it gets ejected into the air.
Is everybody familiar with the question of the muck layers that you have, like over the northern part of the world, right? Over Siberia and Alaska, and over the northern reaches of Siberia and the islands off of Siberia?
Yeah, massive amount of mud. You mean like where all the mammoths were buried?
Yeah, it's as
Yeah.
if
trees and mud and mammoth bones and all kinds of other extinct animal bones are in there.
All of that stuff just got sucked up into the sky and run through a blender and then just dumped back out over the surface of the earth, right? It's unbelievable. You know, it's like all the bones are disarticulated. It's like,
well, Neil talks about that in the flood when we were in the polar configuration and we disconnected from Saturn. The mountain of water that was above the Earth, up, you know, it was stretched into space about 200-300 miles above the Earth, being pulled up by the electrical force in the connection. When that disconnected, all that water released and sloshed back and forth a couple of times on the planet, giving us Noah's flood.
right.
So yeah, I mean, all the water going down and then coming back up, you would expect large deposits of animals in low areas everywhere around the world, and we see that in Colorado, we see that in up in BC, we see whale bones in northern Ontario up on the Canadian Shield. How the heck did they get up there? Well, water has pretty amazing power.
So I've been trying to fit the whole Earth crust displacement model into the electric model, and I'm having a hard time justifying that. You guys have any ideas about?
Well, do you understand the concept of the expanding Earth?
Yeah.
Do you understand how it may have expanded from the southern pole region? And if you have a liquid ball and you expand it from the southern pole or southern region and make it larger, add more water to that planet from the disconnection of Saturn and all the water dropping down, then you're adding mass. The difference in energy that's being supplied to the plasmoid at the center of the Earth then puts more pressure on the inside, expanding it. So at the northern hemisphere kind of spreads out like your hand, like if you're making half of a ball on your hand, they kind of spreads out like if you spread your fingers out a little bit, and the Earth gets bigger, growing from the southern pole. And that's why there's more fissures and cracks in the southern pole area of the Earth than there are on the northern hemisphere. There seems to be very few, and they're very long, that stretch down to below the equator in the north, but there's tons of cracks, expansion type cracks in the southern pole or in the southern hemisphere.
Right, but you're talking about one time when at one time it did that. I'm trying to
When we
figure out
disconnected.
how it's cyclical. How you have the poles mapped in geological formations. I mean, the magnetics mapped in like the magnetic shift, and how that relates with the Earth crust displacement.
Oh, well, we just don't know what's going to happen if the poles flip, or we're experiencing the magnetic pole movement, like, is accelerating right now, and it's moving towards Siberia. So we don't know what's going to happen with the crust when something big happens there, or gets to a certain point and then flips. We don't know.
Yeah, I know. I've been, listening to Ben talking about this, and I'm trying to fit it into the electric model somehow. Like, is that, I know the sun has an 11-year cycle, and we have a, what, 15,000, 12,000 year cycle? I don't know what the cycle is.
12,500 years is half of the great year is 25,900 years long. You might as well say 26,000 years.
And our magnetic pole flips half twice in each great year.
Well, LaPointe's work.
Yeah.
Well, you understand that the galaxy has a positive polarity and a negative polarity below and above its ecliptic.
Yeah.
If David LaPointe's work is true, then when the Earth punches through the, like, we're traveling on a Birkeland current that goes up and down through the galactic plane every 25 or 25,900 years. That's the great year. That's the cycle that we enjoy. 12,000 years of that cycle we're in the negative plane. 12,500 years we're in the positive plane.
I see. Okay, that
You
makes
understand?
sense. Yeah,
That's
now I'm seeing it.
that's probably the reason why our magnetic pole flips every little while. That's just my guess.
And do you think that the Earth, do you think there's a Earth crust displacement that happens in synchronization with that? Like if all of the
Well,
crust
maybe,
is,
yeah. I don't think it's a stable thing. I think stuff happens when the poles flip.
yeah, dude, I was imagining what, like, I mean, maybe then the Earth just stops on a dime and starts spinning the opposite direction,
Well,
and
no, it doesn't do that.
that would be
The
your
moment
Noah flood right there, right?
the momentum doesn't change because we know that from ancient texts when they said the sun stopped and moved backwards for half a day and then set, like other places in the world said, like in South America, they said the sun didn't rise for 12 hours and then rose. But the moon and the stars, they moved. So we know that the earth has moved its position. It may have even been a partial pole flip of sorts, or a movement or jiggle when another planet came close by. Its magnetic field pushed on ours and kind of disturbed the earth for a second or two. But the, there are people out there that think that the earth may have flipped, and
Yeah, Velikovsky
some of
thinks it flipped and it stopped and started going the other way. That it used to go from east to
right.
west, and then it went from. If that happened,
and we
then
have
the
and we
oceans
have to
would
think about,
stop and then go into a
but
full ocean tsunami.
but but Greg, think about this. What does Anthony Peratt say about Squatterman and all of this stuff that happened in the sky? He said it happened in the South Pole, in the Southern Pole region, right?
Yeah, but the
What
Yeah, he
South
if
did.
Pole was
what
different.
if what if our Southern Pole was our Northern Pole, was pointing to the north instead, and this flip occurred, and now, well, wait a second.
There's
We
good
think that this is normal. That the North Pole has always been the North Pole.
there's good
I
reason
don't
to
think.
believe that the South Pacific anomaly was at one time the North or South Pole. I've heard that before. I don't know if it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Greg,
isn't
Actually, I read it in Troy McLaughlin's book.
Greg, this gets back into this thing you've heard me say about the Mid-Atlantic Bulge, right, and Pico Island,
Yeah,
Portuguese.
that's something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Pico Island is the highest point of land in the Atlantic. Okay, it's would have been the center of Pangea, would have been the absolute center of the supercontinent. The supercontinent expanded away from, or fell away from Pico Island.
So that would have been the original
You
North Pole or South Pole?
would have been the original,
North Pole.
would have been the original Saturn facing point.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you get on Google Earth and you bring Pico Island to the absolute center of the picture that you're seeing, right? And then grab one of the edges and just rotate the Earth, 180 degrees, what you'll be seeing is
Siberia.
you'll be seeing water, just the Pacific void, right? You'll be seeing just a couple of little pieces of land around the edge, right? But basically all of the mass, all the continental mass of the planet is on one side. Okay, and that comes from being pulled into this Saturnian alignment by both electromagnetic and gravitational forces. Okay, and this is why you have this egg-shaped Earth.
Whereabouts is the Pacific Bulge, Ted?
The Atlantic bulge. Okay, the mid-Atlantic bulge is.
No, there's one in the Pacific that was hypothesized that to be the northern.
No, I suspect that like Pico Island has been the sub-Saturn point. Okay, Pico Island is the very highest point in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, it's about 7,000 feet above sea level. Okay, and the Portuguese Azores and Pico Island is like I said, that's the center of the mid-Atlantic bulge. That would have been the center of the supercontinent. Like I say, I do not, the idea of expanding Earth theories, doesn't enter into my thinking as to what the Earth looked like, or what the situation was with gravity. Why you would have had this increase in gravity over the last few thousand years, right? It's like, I'd much rather go with Ralph Sansbury's version of what gravity is and just, understand that the electrostatic fields collapsed and then gravity increased, right? It's like gravity is an electrostatic dipole effect. It was being damped by this much greater electrostatic surface charge of the Earth in prehistoric times, even recent prehistoric times.
Well, yeah, when the Earth was connected with Saturn, we were in Saturn's influence and its, energy, and it gave us a different gravitational constant.
You've got two things you're trying to explain with an expanding Earth theory. You're trying to explain the dinosaurs, right, which would be crushed by their own weight in our present world, and you're also trying to explain these tectonic plates of the ancient supercontinent, which would require seemingly a world of greater curvature, a smaller world, right? But what really was the case was that you had an egg-shaped world, and Pangea was simply sitting up at the high end of the egg, right? Which, of course, you've got a greater curvature. So I don't see that you really need expanding Earth for any of the things that you're trying to explain, right? You've got better explanations for both of these phenomena. The other thing about expanding Earth theories is there really just isn't time, because you're talking about dinosaurs being, walking around, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years ago, right? I mean, American Indian native.
No, I'm not talking about them walking around that. 12,000 years was when the last dinosaur walked, or 12,900 years ago when this last event happened. It was the last time they.
Okay, I don't believe you can quite say that. You've got recognizable dinosaur types showing up in petroglyphs, like in North America, right? You've got that representational petroglyph up there.
Right. We have the South Americans. We have stones from South America of people writing.
Eco stones, and then you've got the.
But we don't know how old that stuff is. That could be pre-cataclysm.
It could be. I mean, I can't guarantee it, but it's like, it seems to me it's very hard to believe that, like, you would have something like that, a Gawa rock glyph, sitting there, being created 20 or 30,000 years ago, and nobody touched it, and it's still as believable as it is, right? I mean, I think it's, you've also got like Lewis and Clark claiming that their Indian guides were in mortal terror at the sight of these Bishi Pishu glyphs around the Mississippi River, right? Because the original meaning of the thing was like, danger, one of these things lives here, right?
And instant electric fossilization, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any rate.
And obviously you're talking pre-gravity change.
Okay. But even if you were talking about something happening 30 or 40, 50,000 years ago, then that's not enough time to try to explain this change in gravity by Earth expansion, right? I mean,
I'm not sure that that's the case. There's quite a bit of material in the mantle And if there's a plasmoid at the center of the Earth, a Z-pinch, and it disconnects from Saturn, and the Earth then connects to the sun's Birkeland current, which is a lot stronger than Saturn's energy that it was imparting to the Earth. It could have expanded the Earth very quickly. And we see this in evidence of the ancients talking about the cataclysm, where earthquakes were just outrageous, probably way past the scale of 10, and just opened up the Earth. They say the Earth opened up and swallowed everything.
Well, the North Pole is 10,000 feet deep, and the South Pole is 10,000 feet high. And there was something else I wanted to bring up too. We're talking. Oh, what do you think?
And we
What
know
do you guys think about deGrasse's hypothesis that it's possible that beings or birds or whatever could have flown between the worlds?
I don't know about that. Um,
That's
well,
pretty wild,
see,
isn't
there, see, during the electrical glow connection between Mars and Earth, a lot of material was stripped off of Mars and it was deposited here on Earth. I'm pretty sure of that. And in one of these 12 oscillations, the 12 labors of Hercules, these beings that were on Mars, or possibly on Mars, may have been stripped off with some of the material. They could have survived. We get stories of beings falling from the sky in the Bible as the fallen angels. Not only in the Bible, but there are story of beings falling from the skies from all kinds of cultures all around the world.
Okay, Greg.
And
Greg, you'd asked about
Yeah.
Aldebaran and about his
Yeah.
theory. Aldebaran and his other, I believe he had a co-author for Solaria Venerea, right? Envisioned a system where you have like a barbell sitting around, like a hand weight or something, like with a tube and then round balls on the ends, right? He believed that you'd have like a super sun, right? And the super sun had basically ejected this other thing, which he called super Uranus, okay?
Right.
And that you'd have like what he called a central fire, which would be like we would understand as a Birkeland current between this and this other body, right, which is super Uranus. And then you had like a flux tube surrounding this whole thing, right? And then he believed that you had planets rotating around the central fire, okay, in between the sun and super Uranus, and that you had an atmosphere which was not planet by planet, right? This atmosphere that you would have had, according to Aldebaran,
Yes.
would have been general, right? In other words, under something, assuming you had like a Texas pterosaur or something in a saddle form, and if you really want to get people laughing at you on forums, start talking about shit like that, really, okay. Well, I'm saying it's not a completely harebrained idea. It's like,
Yeah. Exactly.
you could picture something like that happening, but what I would tell you is this: it's like, we have a better model now than and Earl Milton, I think,
Yeah.
had. We have a model in which we have a Saturnian system, which is inside this plasma heliosphere. And I believe that you do have, like when you go back to the system where you have the Earth and Mars, lined up with Saturn inside this plasma heliosphere, I think it's highly likely that you would have had an atmosphere that was general to the system, right? And was not, in other words, it's entirely possible that you could have had like a Cessna or a Texas pterosaur and gotten from Earth to Mars, right? Now, there's a piece of evidence sitting there which indicates that you almost had to have had something like that going on. And I can tell you what that is. Okay, is everybody familiar with the situation with the two little moons of Mars? Okay, Deimos and Phobos. Okay, and Phobos is like almost provably an artificial construction. Okay, real moons are supposed to be made out of dirt and green cheese, right? They're not supposed to reflect light all over creation like a mirror, right? Phobos reflects light all over the place. And even before you had the color pictures of Phobos, you had, oh, what's the guy's name, right? City on the Edge of Forever, right? It said that you could almost count the rivets, even before they had the color photos, the HIRISE, HIRIC, University of Arizona astrophysics. And you've got those images now, and you can just get on Google and do an image search, HIRISE and Phobos, HIRISE, and you will turn up these pictures, which, I mean, you've got something which is obviously artificial. There's another Google search you could do, image search, like Phobos and anomaly, okay, Phobos anomaly. And you've got this tower structure sticking straight out of Phobos, which absolutely doesn't belong on a natural moon or natural satellite. Okay, and this is some sort of a docking station or something like that. You've got reports that have been seen on the internet for years, claiming that the Russian probes had used penetrating radar and had taken pictures of the interior of Phobos. They said they were seeing like rectangular interior rooms, okay, structures, right? So the thing is obviously artificial. Now, that gets into a question of like, two questions, like why would you want to do it, right? Well, the question of why, I think, says that, the people living